Richard Foster from Foster Infrastructure here. Today I'm taking a look at a World Bank online learning campus training course on the fiscal implications of public-private partnerships and managing fiscal risks. What I'll do is I'll take you through a description of what the course is all about, how it's presented, what I think's good about it, what I think are some of the minor issues, and let you know whether this is something that you should be taking a look at to improve your knowledge of public-private partnerships and fiscal risks. So this is an online training course consisting of 6 modules. Each module is designed to take you about 30 minutes. Some are slightly shorter, some are slightly longer, but about 30 minutes per module to work your way through. If you rush it, you might be able to get through it a bit faster. But if you look in detail at some of the excellent additional information that's provided, you might find yourself spending an hour on an individual module, really getting into the nitty-gritty of some of the issues. The way the course is structured, it starts off in Module 1 with an introduction to infrastructure. So really starting with the basics of what we're talking about when we're talking about infrastructure. Module 2 then provides an introduction to fiscal management and contingent liabilities. Contingent liabilities being one of the particular issues we need to deal with when we're looking at the fiscal implications of PPPs. Module 3 then brings us to public-private partnerships. It explains what public-private partnerships are. Module 4 looks at risk in infrastructure and PPPs. So what are the types of risks that arise in infrastructure and PPPs? Why is risk important? Module 5 takes a look at the actual processes involved in assessing the fiscal implications of PPPs. Module 6 consists of a quiz to test your learning and ensure that you have understood the key messages of this training program on PPPs and fiscal risk. Okay, so that's the content, but how is the course actually presented in the online learning environment? Well, I think this is a really neat little course, the way it's been put together by the World Bank. The course uses strong visual elements to guide you through the content and provide an interactive approach to learning that really helps to reinforce the messages that it's trying to convey. As you go through, you'll find there are case studies from a range of different countries, many examples, questions to make sure you're understanding as you're going, and links to a range of downloadable resources for later use. So with some of these downloadable resources, what you can do is save them, put them to one side so that you can proceed through the course and then come back to those resources later if you want to dig into some of these issues in much more detail. To me, this is a really slick and impressive online learning environment. I guess that shouldn't be too much of a surprise. The World Bank has a lot of resources and does a lot of work in the capacity building space, but I really do think they should be commended for what they've put together here in terms of the presentation style. Overall, I think this online training program provides an excellent introduction to fiscal risks associated with PPPs, why they're important, and what the processes are for looking at those risks. I do have some minor issues, but these are really issues coming from the perspective of an experienced PPP and infrastructure practitioner, and they're really not things that I think the target audience for this training program would be too concerned about. The first issue, or the first area where I think the training program gives some slightly inaccurate information, is in a question that asks about projects where the government is the operator of the infrastructure. Now, in some markets, a common form of PPP is what's often referred to as a design, build, finance and maintain contract. The private sector designs, builds, finances and maintains the infrastructure, but government is the operator. This is particularly common in social infrastructure PPPs, particularly, I guess, in developed markets, but not exclusively. A common example seen in some countries is in the schools sector, where the private sector designs, builds, finances and maintains schools and often offers or provides related services such as cleaning of the schools, but the government operates the schools in the sense that the government provides the teachers. Now, under the definition of a PPP provided earlier in the training, that project would clearly be a PPP. However, there is a question in relation to PPPs that are operated by the government, and if you answer that a project operated by the government can be a PPP, you get that answer wrong. And the explanation is that if the government is the operator, then it is not a PPP. So there's a bit of a contradiction there between the definition of a PPP and the later statement that a project cannot be a PPP if the government is the operator. Another area in which I would say this course isn't quite correct is in its discussion on different types of risk in infrastructure projects and PPPs. The course has what it calls a risk typology, in other words, a way of categorising risks. It first talks about risks that are quite common in any infrastructure project, risk associated with the site, risks associated with design and construction, risks associated with operation. And then it moves on to talk about risks that it presents as being specific to PPPs and PPP contracts. And the risks that it presents as being specific to PPPs and PPP contracts include risks like force majeure risk and demand risk and default risk. You could easily interpret the way the categorisation of risk is presented as saying that force majeure is only a risk in PPPs. It's not a risk in traditionally delivered infrastructure projects. Now, that's not correct at all. Force majeure risk is a risk that applies whether a project is a PPP or not. In a PPP contract, you may need quite sophisticated legal clauses dealing with the consequences, and you might not have those clauses in a traditional construction contract, but the risk still exists. This project behind me was a traditionally delivered infrastructure project. Now, if a force majeure event, such as an earthquake, was to occur partway through construction, clearly that is a risk to the project. Force majeure is not just a PPP risk. One other point that I would make is that the course focuses on the most common PPP environment worldwide, where projects are largely funded by user charges or commonly funded by user charges, and where governments are giving guarantees and other forms of support that do create future contingent liabilities. If you are, as I am, based in Australia, then our PPPs tend to be a little different because of the way government de-risks projects prior to the tender process, because of the way that we structure the projects, because of the way that we budget for the projects, and because of the way that we account for the projects. For us, fiscal risks in the form of contingent liabilities are not so significant, and our approach to PPPs doesn't require a separate PPP fiscal management exercise. It's actually integrated into our whole budget process and our financial reporting and accounting processes. But for most countries undertaking PPPs, the course focuses on what really is a key issue, which is that you need to have the right framework in place for the identification, assessment and management of the fiscal risks created by PPPs. So in summary, this is a great little course if you want to understand PPPs and their potential fiscal risks and what the processes are for managing those risks. So that's my quick look at the World Bank Group's Open Learning Campus online course on PPPs and fiscal risks. There's a link below in the video description to take you to the course. And please don't forget to hit subscribe below so you'll find out about future videos from Foster Infrastructure.